Welcome to Drinks Coach. Yes, it's me, Joe Wadsack, yes, and you're watching Vinesack on YouTube. Hit the bell to subscribe and get more notifications in the future. Instagram. Oh yeah, speaking of social media, I'm now the very proud owner of a podcast on Apple Podcasts. Look up Talking About Wine, which is my friend Richard Avery. His actor's name is Alex Avery. I think Richard Avery was taken. He's an old school friend of mine. And we are now doing a wine podcast. He has some very interesting friends, very interesting actor friends also. So keep an eye out for some potential very exciting celebrities to be on our channel quite soon. But in the meantime, we thought we'd just go through just getting up to speed, getting used to each other, getting the volumes right, and just bear with us. The first 2 or 3 shows will be a little bit kind of clumsy, but until we've got our flow, we don't want to bring in super expert actors and things. So, Talking About Wine podcast, on Apple Podcasts. First one's up, History of Wine, and some more to follow very soon. So that's the good news for today. Please let me know what you think of the podcast, either on here or there, because these things, as you know, are only as good as the people listening. So give us some advice if we think we're off beam. Okay, so this one's a bit of fun. Yeah, you can't see it from there, can you? Golden Blend, Wine of Georgia. That's not America. It's Georgia, as in capital Tbilisi, Georgia. And this wine, even funkier and groovier. It's a picture of 2 people sitting above what look like 3 scrota, but they're actually amphorae under the ground, or what the Georgians more lovingly call kvevries. I think there's another name for them, churis, I think, in this region. But they are pottery fermenting vessels. I once was flying back from a very fancy food festival in a place called the Gallagher Estate or Gallagher Estate in Gauteng, which is near Johannesburg. I had an armed guard and shit. It was really quite exciting. Where I came on stage to many hundreds of people and talked about my wines, because BBC Food and Drink, which I was the presenter of at the time, and BBC in general, very popular in South Africa. So I went over there to do some shows, which was very exciting in my sort of probably most popular of days. And in the queue on the way back, and they very kindly sent me in the nice bit of the plane, something I'm not very used to doing, but very excited when I do. I was in the club class and the business class line for British Airways, and next to me was this teeny tiny poppet of a woman who had this little button nose, who looked extremely pretty, if I may say, but she was the size of a mouse. And her name was Katie Mellower. For those people that remember 9 Million Bicycles in Beijing and all that stuff, and know Katie, she was a Brit Award winner. I think she's an Ivor Novello winner. Amazing songstress. And she was always given a first-class ticket when she did concerts. And she just done a concert in Johannesburg. But she'd always cash it in to get a business class ticket, so the band could travel business class with her, because she didn't feel it was right for her to go first class with the band in the back who went steerage, which I thought was very cool. And also she was very sweet. And when she asked me, not the other way around, I did say hi. I said, I wish I knew more about your work. I know some of your pop songs and they're great. But she said, what do you do then? And I said, I'm a wine judge and a wine taster. I've just been out giving wine talks. And she went, did you know? Did you know? And she was waving her finger at me quite excitedly that wine was invented in Georgia, because she's Georgian. Okay, Mellower, she's from Georgia. And I said, yes, I did know that. And she went, oh, okay. Well, I spend the time, everyone I meet, I go, Georgian is wine, the oldest found wine vessel with the DNA to find out what was in the vessel was Georgia. And there is irrefutable proof that the Georgians have been making wine for over 8,000 years. And to this day, the oldest evidence we can find is around that old. There are some other exciting things coming through, exciting findings in places like Egypt. But I just thought it was rather nice she was so passionate about the subject. I tried to work out whether she was passionate about wine or whether she was passionate about Georgia. Well, I imagine it was the latter, not the former. We then sit in our seats, and we end up sitting in seats in like these little pairs where on British Airways one sits forwards and one sits backwards with a divider, and the divider's down for takeoff so you can see out the windows, and there she is facing, so we're staring at each other. I'm getting quite embarrassed at this point. Anyway, several glasses, if not bottles of wine later, we both doze off and sleep the rest of the 12-hour flight. And it was just a real treat and an honour. Ooh, that was close. An honour to meet Katie Melua. So there we go. Bringing us on to the subject of Georgia. Did you know that Georgia has history of wine going back 8,000 years? Of course you do now. Okay. So why am I showing you these wines? Well, because Georgian wines are cool. They're a thing. And it's one of those regions which I'm just not familiar with. I've never been there, never been invited. I might have to go on my own Todd in a car or a hitchhike or something. But I know nothing about it in real terms. Until last year, when I was judging a flight of wines at the International Wine Challenge, I was given a line of wines, blind, they're just bagged up. It just said at the bottom, Georgia. It was a range of white wines. Some of the wines were very white and some of them were not so white. They were this colour because they were made in amphorae in Kvevri. And these wines are orange wines. And what's extraordinary about these wines is that I always, with natural wines, I tend to feel that if you force a square peg through a round hole, you don't get great results. And a lot of these wines, which people are trying to make in a way that was made in the Stone Age, if you like, in order to create more authenticity, miss the point that years and years of evolution, years and years of science have allowed us to enhance the things we like in wine and reduce the volume on the things we don't like. But, all things to everyone, things change over time. And what is, when it's fashionable to be highly high-tech one decade, it may not necessarily be fashion the next. So my very good friend Doug Regg, who is one of the most incredible wine brains in the country, who is marketing director and kind of all-round kind of, he's the oracle of one of the great wine imported companies of this country, which is Les Caves de Pyrène, which started off in Guildford many years ago with Eric Naru. Now they're in all over the country, really. He very kindly, I asked him to send me samples for the show and said, look, send me stuff and I'll taste them online if you don't mind. I'll taste them while I do it, not having tried them before. And he said, no, please do. I've got some very exciting wines to show you. So 2 of the wines that were in that box were Georgian, 1 white, 1 red. So here we are. 7 minutes into a show where I told you an anecdote smugly about being on a plane with Katie Melua. Tasty. So here we are with 2 wines from the Caves de Pyrène, thanks to Dougie Regg. I'm going to start with the white. This wine is from a region called Kakheti. If you look at Georgia as a long kind of like big sandwich, kind of like a big, like, I don't know, like American football, I don't know. It's not really any of those shapes, but it's kind of thick in the middle and a bit thinner at the edges, at the ends. So Tbilisi's at this end, is at the east end. And around here is Kakheti, which is where this region is. And it's where some of the finest wines from Georgia come from. This wine's also made from a blend of grape varieties, primarily a grape variety called Rkatsiteli. Rkatsiteli is grown in Georgia, it's grown in Bulgaria, it's grown in Hungary, it's grown in quite many places, and is, at least to this day, because of the evidence we found in Georgia, the oldest Vitis vinifera grape variety we've discovered. This is the OG. This is the original gangster Rkatsiteli, first white wine grape ever discovered. It's also grown, also blended with some other varieties which we discovered to be very, very good in Georgia. And most of these things are very hard to pronounce, but Mtsvane is a very, very lovely, aromatic, texturally silky, delicious white. There's Kikvi, there's Kisi, and these are all different varieties which I know very little about. But they've been mixed together, put into a pot, fermented, and then left in the pot for 7 months just to settle and to change and to just to kind of, I don't know, find itself. And then it's scooped out and bottled and processed. So this wine is the first time I've done a Georgian Kvevri wine on the show. I can't tell whether it's going to be sweet or dry. It's 12.5% alcohol from Caves de Pyrène. Yeah, brought in vintage 2022, and it's from a company called Iberayeli or something. Okay, chin. Well, I've tasted a lot of orange wines and a lot of skin contact wines. That is where the skins are fermented in a white wine. And a few on the show. But few of them have been as well integrated and as satisfying as this wine. This wine is not that old, but it's been fermented with skin, so the wine has a slightly different aromatic. The aromatic is almost like a red wine. It's made like a red wine, so you get these kind of aromas which are more peach, slightly grippier, sappier, if you like. The wine in the mouth has some extremely subtle tannin, which is nice. It's almost a suede-y grip. I taste like semi-dried fuzzy apricots a little bit, but there's more to it than that. But what's lovely about this is even though it hasn't been put in stainless steel and it hasn't been pumped over with nitrogen to try and protect it or anything like that, this wine has been given all the oxygen that a wine can get, and indeed been buried in the ground and fermented in porous terracotta qvevri. This wine has a vitality and a freshness, which I imagine is very, very enduring. I imagine this wine would keep for a long time because it's done a lot of its oxygenating already. This is rather a special wine, I think. I'm just having a look, see if there's anything else I can tell you about it. It is biodynamic, of course. It's as fresh as it can be. It's not been treated in any way whatsoever. It's totally unfined, totally unfiltered. There's a tiny amount of sulfites in the wine. But compared to any other kind of foodstuffs, they're almost negligible. It's bone dry. It says it's 14% here, but it's only 12.5%. And the wine was left on skins for 7 months, which is probably where it gets its protection from, where its antioxidant properties. But this wine, I can only begin to think of what delicious foods would go with this. Whether that's freshwater fish, whether that's chicken, a whole bunch of different kind of roasted fruits and flavours and salads and so forth. Anyway. That wine's really delicious. It doesn't look like a 25 pound wine, but it is. And the bottle, fair enough, they're not spending money on the bottle packaging particularly. But the wine tastes like it's 20 quid. Absolutely fantastic. Delicious wine. What a treat. Okay, moving on to our next Georgian wine. Okay, I'll put this in a red wine glass because it's obviously red. From Arshil Gunyava. I understand that this guy is revered around the world, and Carve typically have managed to snap up the agency. And it's got a picture of 3 guys on the front looking like they're having a right rare old time next to 3 old rare qvevris. And this is from, it says quality wine of Georgia. It's made from a grape variety called Oshkonuri Sapere. Well, there is a grape variety which is famous from Georgia called Saperavi. And Saperavi is grown all over the world, actually, surprisingly, in quite a lot of places. But it's primarily a Georgian variety. I've even drunk Saperavi grown in the alpine valleys of Australia, where it produces extremely dark wine. And why? Well, Saperavi is a Tanturier variety. Like Alicante Boucher, for those people who've ever come across it. It's a grape variety that, if you cut open, has very dark red flesh. So it stains your fingers. It's got juice inside, which is already red, like mulberries. So the wine is always going to be very dark. Tanturier varieties don't always give you any more than that, anything than dry, tannic, difficult grapes to grow. Triomphe d'Alsace, Rondo. There are all sorts of grape varieties grown in the UK because they've been crossed here and there in order to produce red wines which have a decent colour. And Tanturier varieties during the 60s and 70s were preferred for this reason because they automatically had colour, and they're pretty rank, most of them. I can say that Rondo can produce palatable wine, but it's not my favourite variety. Alicante Boucher, which is grown a lot in Portugal and all over the world, I find is brutally tannic and crunchy and green. It has a greenness which I'm really not happy with. So what the hell's going on here? Well, Oshkonuri Sapere, I think may be related to Saperavi. I mean, the Saperavi. It's also a Tanturier variety producing dark wines. But this is in this particular region anyway, very much considered to be the best grape variety in the region. The region we're talking about here is, I'm just trying to remember which one it is. Bear with me 1 second. Complan, Dr. Kemp's. Doesn't say on the label. No, I can't find it for now. Anyway, this is from a region which is further west of Tbilisi. I remember where it was on the island. But it's also the most populous region of Georgia, and it has large cities of its own. But Archil, the producer of this wine, rates this as his best red and thinks that Caves de Pyrène, which is a transitional variety between a wild vine and a wine that's been cultivated however many thousands of years ago. He thinks it's the best variety that he produces. Let's have a look here. What vintage are we on? 2021. Cool label. I just love the simplicity of the labels. There we go. Can you see that? I hope so. First red wine from Georgia to be shown on the Drinks Coach. Wow. It smells of dried herbs and crunchy berries. It smells a bit like a Pimp My Marciac. Have you ever drunk? I think I've used Fair Servadou on the show before, but Marciac is from the south of France. It's a wonderful, crunchy, elderberry-like wine, which has a tang and a little sappiness to it, but is quite delicious, full of forest fruit and currants. But this wine has an overlay, very distinct overlay of like dried oregano and thyme, which I think is lovely. Sappy, nearly opaque in colour, quite chewy. If I had like a kofta or some maybe goat or lamb or something quite fatty, maybe a shoulder of lamb, this would be absolutely delicious. It's quite sour in its delivery, but I'm okay with that. I think that's just high acid. But it has texture, it has richness. Again, completely natural, I presume. And a wine that's, I think, left in its Caveries again for 2 or 3 months after ferment to get itself together. I imagine it's similar sort of money. I think it's sort of £20 plus. But here we go. My first 2 Georgian wines. The second one a little bit more wild, I think, a bit more savage. But I love that. I love that. You know, we get bored of sterile, uncharacterful wines, and the wines in Eastern Europe and Middle Europe are really starting to appeal, I think, across the broad audience of people who have drunk ordinary wines for some time now. I think the white wine is more sophisticated. I think this is easier to appreciate. Bone dry. There you go. Answers on a postcard or questions on a postcard. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you've drunk Georgian wines before. Sarah Abbott, Master of Wine, I'm going to copy you in on this because I don't know where to start with this. Maybe I need your help. So there we go. Georgian wine on Drinks Coach. See you next time.